When the original Star Wars released into cinema, it completely blew up what we knew as movies. It created this entire universe that made people want to be part of. It wasn't just a movie that was just there to be there, it was a movie that people wanted to actually live in, and that's something that not many movies could actually do before this. Now, if you're curious, there are actually two different movies when it comes to the original trilogy that people don't really know of. There are the original movies that were theatrical versions, and then there are the special editions that are released now on Blu-ray. I'm going to be covering the Blu-ray special editions because I haven't got my hands on the original copies, or I actually haven't bought the despecialized editions yet, but I'm probably going to do that and do a review on that in the future. So you guys know I'm not reviewing the original movie, I'm going to be reviewing the specialized editions. So the original trilogy specialized editions were going to be a big deal. You know, all the fan base were super excited to finally get their hands on this new and improved Star Wars movies. But then it came out and people were kind of a little mad about it. So today we're asking the question, is Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, the special edition, good, bad, or is it just okay? Let's check it out. Part 1, The Princess. The movie begins 19 years after Episode 3. A rebellion has risen up to oppose the Empire. A group of rebel spies had stolen the plans of the Galactic Empire's Death Star, a colossal moon-sized space station capable of destroying entire planets. But that is another movie review for another time. An Imperial senator named Princess Leia Organa, who is secretly one of the rebellion's leaders, had obtained the Death Star's stolen plans. However, her starship is captured by an Imperial Star Destroyer under the command of the ruthless Darth Vader. Before she's captured, Leia hides her plans in the memory of the astromech droid R2-D2, who, along with the protocol droid C-3PO, flee from the ship and head to the desert planet of Tatooine. So part 1 in this film was pretty brief. It pretty much just kind of throws us into the action, and that's kind of the point of it, so that's okay. While the special effects in this film were kind of lacking, I would definitely say the practical effects they used in these films, especially with the ships, they look really good still, even after all these years. I mean, you can kind of see that they are definitely, you know, model like figures and stuff, especially when you look at things like the HD versions of these movies. But I think for what it is, it's fine. It serves a purpose, and it looks decent enough to make it look real enough, and that's what it's the whole point of it is. So that's good. I think this scene also does a good job of showing just how sassy Leia is too. You know, she probably gets that from old Uncle Kenobi. Darth Vader is also established fairly early as a pretty threatening villain. And if you haven't seen the prequels, you don't exactly know what Darth Vader can do yet, but he has a presence that just scares like everybody and sends like a shiver of doom down your spine. You know this guy's capable of strong things. So that's really cool that they can do that without actually presenting him with all these crazy powers that we see later in the films. So that's pretty cool. So like I said, part 1 is pretty brief, but it does a good job of getting us into the story. So in my opinion, I think it's a pretty good beginning into the film. Part 2, The Farm Boy. On Tatooine, the droids are captured by Jawa traders, who sell them to the moisture farmers Owen and Beru Lars, and their nephew, Luke Skywalker. While cleaning R2-D2, Luke accidentally triggers part of the holographic recording of Leia, in which she requests help from Obi-Wan Kenobi. The next morning, Luke finds R2-D2 missing, and while searching for him encounters old Ben Kenobi, an elderly hermit he knew. He tells Luke that he was once a Jedi Knight of the former Galactic Republic named Obi-Wan. However, the majority of the Jedi had been wiped out by the Empire, and Kenobi was forced to go into exile. Luke learns that his father fought alongside Obi-Wan as a Jedi Knight until Vader, a former pupil of Obi-Wan's, turned to the dark side of the Force and murdered him. Obi-Wan presents Luke with his father's old weapon, a Jedi lightsaber. R2-D2 plays Leia's message for Obi-Wan, in which she begs for him to take the Death Star plans to her home planet of Alderaan and give them to her father, Bail Organa. Obi-Wan invites Skywalker to accompany him on the journey and learn the ways of the Force, and initially, Luke declined, but changes his mind after discovering that the Imperial stormtroopers had come to his farm and killed his aunt and uncle, and it was at that moment Luke knew he needed to follow his destiny. So right off the bat, this one has always kind of gotten me, and this is a small thing, this isn't a big deal, but I'm just curious, do droids like feel pain in this universe? Because these droids definitely seem to be screaming in agony. But why? Why would they be programmed with nerves? I don't really get it. I know, just a movie, but it always just made me wonder, like, what? But on a more serious note, this whole droid exchange in the beginning of the film is fun, but it does feel a little too campy for me. Like, this part of the film shows its age and the way the actors, well, act. It's just kind of cheesy. I mean, it's not bad, it just kind of makes the film show its age more. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to take into account. So that's just my opinion. I really like the fact that R2 legit tricks Luke into taking off his restraining bolt. It adds to R2's overall presence, making him more of a character and less of an actual droid, so I think that's interesting. I also really like the brief exchange between Owen and Beru. You can tell they really want the best for Luke, but they also want to keep him safe. It's an interesting dynamic that I think every parent goes through, so it makes their relationship with Luke feel more real, and I like that. As far as Obi-Wan's scenes go, I really like his and Luke's interaction, and it feels even better if you just came from the prequels. But I will say, with the specialized editions, the lightsaber scene still looks just a little too clunky. I mean, I understand, this is one of those most iconic scenes in all of cinema. But if you're going to go back and you're going to throw a boulder in front of R2-D2, or add like a bunch of stormtroopers riding dewbacks in the backgrounds and foregrounds, and put like big ugly butts of beasts walking by the screen and covering up what's going on, why wouldn't you just update the lightsaber effects? I don't really get that part. Or at least improve the lightsaber color to better match the darker blue we see in Revenge of the Sith. This isn't particularly a criticism of the film, but more of a point of oversight by George Lucas. Now for the last scene in part 2. I think it's a very powerful scene. It also seems to be the point of the movie where the film begins to feel less campy. The story is growing, and more importantly, Luke is growing as a character. So overall, while part 2 starts fairly weak, it really becomes stronger of a narrative as it unfolds, so I like that. Part 3. Han Solo. Obi-Wan and Luke visit the Mos Eisley Cantina, where after a brief confrontation with some aliens, they meet a smuggler named Han Solo and his co-pilot Chewbacca. Han shoots second, and after negotiating a price, Obi-Wan, Luke, R2-D2, and C-3PO go aboard Han's ship, the Millennium Falcon. Around the same time, the Death Star commander, Grand Moff Tarkin, orders the destruction of Alderaan using the Death Star's turbo blaster. The Death Star fires a death beam that causes, the death of the planet, and the Falcon crew soon arrive to discover that the planet has been wiped out. And soon enough, the Millennium Falcon is grabbed and pulled upon by the Death Star using the station's tractor beam. So I think the beginning of the scene does have some shoddy CGI. I mean, some of it looks worse than some of the stuff in The Phantom Menace, but while most of it just kind of seems to be thrown in because, I don't really think it affects the story very much, so I'm not gonna really complain about that. The Mos Eisley scene is one of those special scenes that does a great job of introducing us into this mystical science fiction film. Or I should even say it does a great job of introducing us into the whole Star Wars universe itself. Before the prequels, this was a scene that showed us the many different possibilities this franchise could take. And while it's a little scene, it has always stuck with me, and it's stuck with a bunch of fans too. Now we get to arguably the most infamous scene in all of Star Wars, where Han Solo shot first. But it's strange, because when I watch it, it looks like Greedo shot first. Like, right here. Watch it.
Yes, I bet you have.
See? Han, breaks his neck and shoots Greedo after Greedo shot first. So it's clear as day to me, obviously Han shot second. That's just how it is, because Greedo shot first, so I never understood the Han shot first thing. That just never made sense to me. So I'm just gonna, leave it at that. I have the proof, so that's just the way it is. Part 4. The Rescue. Upon the Death Star, Luke and Han jump some patrolling stormtroopers and take their armor as a disguise. They go to save the princess while Obi-Wan goes to disable the tractor beam. They soon find Leia and the gang attempts to escape. Obi-Wan sacrifices himself in a lightsaber duel with Darth Vader to enable the other heroes to escape, and Han, using his excellent piloting skills, gets away from the Death Star. However, using a tracking beacon placed aboard the Millennium Falcon, the Imperials follow the rebels to the hidden rebel base of Yavin 4. This part is short but sweet. I always really loved this little conversation between Han on the intercom. It perfectly illustrates his character in only a few seconds, and it's just so good. I also think it's cool to see that these characters, and the actors for that matter, just have such great on-screen chemistry. And I have to admit, out of the prequels, the originals, and the sequels, the three main characters in the originals are so good. They are probably the best trio out of the entire franchise, in my opinion. I think that just have such good chemistry and they feel so real, and I think that is just really cool. So maybe this is my opinion, but that's just how I feel. The Kenobi and Vader fight is one of those things I totally respect for its time, for it was the very first Star Wars movie and the very first lightsaber battle. But I have to admit, its charm is somewhat hindered when you come off Revenge of the Sith and its many lightsaber fights. Now, like I said, I'm not knocking the lightsaber fight in this film, for as I said, it was the very first lightsaber fight, so it would make sense that the fights that came after it would actually be better than this one. But we just saw in episode 3 that an 80-year-old man could do a flip off of a balcony using the Force for assistance. So when we watch these two fight like normal people just kind of swinging bats at each other, and not two of the strongest Jedi and Sith to ever live, it feels just kind of like continuity breaking. Now again, this isn't really the movie's fault, but it is still kind of one of those continuity breaking things that I should point out, so yeah. But overall, I'd say this part is really solid and I like it. Part 5. The Death Star. On Yavin, the rebels examine the Death Star plans and reveal that it can be destroyed by triggering a chain reaction from an external exhaust port, a flaw cleverly designed by the original Death Star architect. And like I said earlier, that is a movie review for another time. Luke joins the Rebel fighter squadron in a siege against the approaching Death Star, while Han collects his payment for helping them and heads off to repay Jabba. In the battle, the rebels suffer heavy losses. Vader leads a squadron of TIE fighters and prepares to attack Luke's X-Wing, but Han Solo has a change of heart and returns just in time, firing at the Imperial fighter, sending Vader spiraling off into space. Guided by Obi-Wan's spirit, Luke turns off his targeting computer and uses the Force to destroy the Death Star just before it can fire upon the Rebel base. The Death Star suit explodes, killing numerous of Imperials, including Grand Moff Tarkin. Back on Yavin 4, Leia awards Luke and Han with medals for their heroism, and the Rebel Alliance lives to fight another day. The end. So, I'll admit, when I was younger, I used to actually turn off this movie right after Kenobi died, for I never really cared about the trench run. For me, when I was a kid, I usually just counted the final lightsaber fight as the end of the film and just kind of stopped watching. But upon rewatching, the trench run is actually really intense, especially when Luke is getting chased by Vader. I also really like how Han saves the day in the end. I think out of all the characters in this film, Han probably has the biggest character development, while still remaining who he is. And for me, that's character development done well. You know, when a character can change their morality, but still fundamentally be the same character and have the same quirks and, you know, the same quips they usually do, that is good development. And that's why Han Solo probably has the best development out of all the characters in this movie. At least in my opinion. And the ending ceremony feels pretty well deserved. There are some movies that have endings that don't really fit their films, but I think this one does a really good job. However, there isn't any dialogue, so while with the music it works really well, but if you were to watch this scene without the music in it, it kind of looks like it would be probably a little strange. See, isn't that just kind of like awkward? If you want to see that scene in full, I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. It doesn't really count against the film at all, but it's just one of those funny things, and I just thought I'd kind of point it out. So in conclusion, this movie is really good. I think it was a great start to the franchise overall. Are some of the later films better? Yeah, but I think this movie has like a somewhat like magic to it that I really can't describe, but I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. Now, as I stated throughout the review, there are very few actual cons with this film in my opinion. And if there are, they're mostly just nitpicks or problems that are out of this movie's control. The biggest con in this movie, which is just my opinion, and it's not really the movie's fault, is that the movie just kind of feels a little slow. Like if you're watching the Star Wars saga by the episodic viewing order, quick tangent here, I actually have a video that covers all the different Star Wars viewing orders, and I definitely recommend checking that out if you want more interesting insight on how to watch these films, but I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Anyways, what I was saying, if you're watching these movies by the episodic viewing order, that means you just came off of watching Revenge of the Sith, which is constantly propelling the story forward. So if you're marathoning from episode 3 to 4, the jump into this movie, which is significantly slower in pace, it's kind of jarring. Now, of course, we actually have Solo and Rogue One now, so you could actually watch those first before jumping into A New Hope. But if you were just going to do the main films, and you just watched episode 3 and you're legit just about to watch episode 4, it's a little jarring to have to jump into a slower paced film. Not that the film isn't good, It's just significantly slower compared to Revenge of the Sith. But overall, Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope is a great movie and it deserves to be revered as such. On May 21st, 1980, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back was released into theaters and was very much beloved, though some weren't too keen on its melancholy ending. It was overall beloved by most critics and fans alike. Now, just like my review for Episode 4, I'll be reviewing the special editions of this film. But I figured that's okay because out of all 4 of the special editions for Episode 4, 5, and 6, it definitely seems like Episode 5 was untouched the most, so I don't think it really matters. And to many fans, this is considered the best movie out of the entire franchise. Well, today we're going to be asking the question, is it good, is it bad, or is it just okay? Let's check it out. Part 1, The Battle of Hoth. 3 years after the destruction of the Death Star, the Rebel Alliance, led by Princess Leia, had set up a new base on the ice planet of Hoth. The Imperial fleet, led by Darth Vader, continues to hunt for the new Rebel base by dispatching probe droids across the galaxy. Luke Skywalker is captured by a Wampa while investigating one of the probes, but manages to escape from the Wampa's lair by using the Force to grab his lightsaber. Before Luke passes out, the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi instructs him to go to Dagobah to train under Jedi Master Yoda. Han Solo eventually locates Luke, and the two of them are rescued by a search party the next morning. Meanwhile, the Imperial probe alerts the Empire of the Rebels' location. The Empire launches a large-scale attack using AT-AT walkers to capture the base, which forces the rebels to evacuate. Han and Leia escape with C-3PO and Chewbacca on the Millennium Falcon, while Luke heads off with R2-D2 to Dagobah. Hoth was always such a cool planet to me. Get it? No, but in all seriousness, I think this entire section of the film does a great job of reintroducing us into the story, especially with our heroes from Episode 4. I mentioned this in my Episode 4 review, but I think Han is one of the best characters from the original trilogy. For while he seems like a cold-hearted man on the outside, he is actually a really loving and loyal friend. Heck, he even puts his own life on the line to go save Luke. He didn't have to do that, but he did. So that's one of those things that it shows just how not only is he one of the coolest characters in Star Wars, but he's also one of the realists, and I just think that's really cool. Okay, so I know from a story point, Luke and Leia don't actually know they're siblings yet, so this scene is kinda okay, but I still find it cringy every time I watch this film. Part of me kinda wishes that the special editions would have did something with this scene just to kind of cover it up, because overall it is kind of unneeded. In fact, I actually took the liberty of doing it, so there you go.
Well, I guess you don't know everything about women yet.
See? Now it's perfect. The Hoth battle is also done really well. It did a great job at showing the relentlessness of the Empire as a whole. And overall, this part does a great job of doing what it's supposed to do. It shows how far our heroes have come since we previously saw them in Episode 4, while still continuing the current story without like a massive exposition dump that some sequels happen to do sometimes. Part 2, An Unlikely Hero. Luke arrives on the swamp planet of Dagobah where he crash lands. He meets a small green creature who reveals himself to be Jedi Master Yoda, and after speaking to Obi-Wan's spirit, Yoda accepts Luke as a student and trains him in the ways of the Force. Yoda then uses the Force to lift Luke's X-Wing out of the swamp. Out of the entire original trilogy, I would say the scenes where Luke and Yoda are together, even if they're just kind of sitting around talking, it's some of the best stuff out of the entire series, especially since Luke doesn't just become great after one session. He continues to fail, but he keeps trying. And personally, I think that's a really powerful message to send to kids. You know, just because you fail doesn't mean you should give up. You should always just keep trying. If you believe in something hard enough, you will succeed, but you got to put the work in. And I think that's something that this entire part just does a great job of showing. Now, speaking of Yoda, he's just so delightful in this film. And the way he interacts with R2 in the beginning is just priceless. R2! The cave scene where Luke fights Vader, decapitates him, and realizes it's his face in the helm is pure genius as well. It beckons back to the old trope where the hero sees what he shall become and then tries his best to prevent that from happening. Some cases, like Macbeth, which just happens to be one of my favorite poems ever. I'm always a sucker for the fallen hero stories. Might be a big reason why Episode 3 is my favorite Star Wars movie. Anyways, like I was saying, in some situations like Macbeth, the hero actually ends up becoming the bad guy trying to keep himself from becoming the bad guy, like we see with Anakin. But in this case, Luke is actually going to succeed, as far as we know. And as I stated, in this case, we've seen the fallen hero story done in Revenge of the Sith. So Luke does not want to become his father. Well, he doesn't know that Vader is his father yet, but this is also kind of like a subtle hint towards that fact, so I think that's pretty cool how they did that. So all in all, this part is really solid, and it keeps you glued to the screen. Part 3, I Know. After evading the Imperial fleet, Han's group travels to the floating cloud city on the gas planet of Bespin, which is run by Han's old friend, Lando Calrissian. Unbeknownst to the group, the bounty hunter Boba Fett had tracked the Falcon. Shortly after their arrival, Lando betrays the group to Darth Vader, who plans on using the group as bait to lure out Luke, intending to capture him and turn him to the dark side. However, in order for Vader to capture Luke, he wanted to use carbonite, so they tested it out on Han. Solo survives the process and is given to Fett, who plans to collect the bounty on him from Jabba the Hutt. Soon Lando, experiencing a change of heart, frees Leia and Chewbacca, but they are all too late to stop Fett from departing with Solo aboard. So the beginning of this part is kind of just not bad. It kind of just feels like filler to me. The whole taking refuge in a meteor, then almost being eaten by a space worm, then escaping the Cloud City. It could technically be its own part in one of these videos. However, since it doesn't really serve the story much other than just to give us more reason to believe why Han and Leia would actually be in love, I chose to just add it into this part. The truth is, while it's interesting, Luke's A story is just so much better than Han and Leia's B story. It feels as though George Lucas really wanted to do Luke's story right. However, at the same time, he didn't really know what to do with the other characters. So he just kind of put them into different shenanigans just to kind of give them something to do while Luke is actually doing something. And honestly, I think it's a pretty glaring issue when it comes to this movie, and I don't think I've ever heard another YouTuber ever talk about this, but it's something that probably should be talked about. Usually people just say Empire is great and that's it, and I think a big reason for that is because a lot of people are afraid to voice out any cons they might have on the film for fear of being attacked by internet trolls. But I think that whole conversation is probably best for like another video, so we'll just keep it at that. For the rest of part 3, I think it's pretty solid. Han and Lando truly feel like old friends, so it makes his portrayal even more shocking. The carbonite scene is just so good. You can really feel the weight and the tension in every line of dialogue from all the characters in the room. It's just, like I keep saying, so good. It's also saddening because Han has come such a long way from his slimy smuggler past. He was no longer just a loser. He was finally becoming the hero he was always supposed to be. So when it happens to Han, it really makes you feel bad for the guy. You know, he's finally doing the right thing and he's being punished for it. So in my opinion, while part 3 of this film starts weak, it definitely ramps up near the end. So can't complain about that. Part 4, I Am Your Father. Luke experiences a premonition of Han and Leia in pain, and against the wishes of Yoda and Obi-Wan, abandons his training to go rescue his friends. Luke arrives in Cloud City. He soon engages Darth Vader in a lightsaber duel that leads them over the city's central air shaft. Vader severs Luke's right hand and attempts to get him to join the dark side. Luke accuses Vader of murdering his father, but Vader reveals to Luke that he is his father. Not wanting to believe the truth, Luke drops into the air shaft and is ejected beneath the floating city, where he hangs on to an antenna. He reaches out telepathically to Leia, who senses him and persuades Lando and Chewie to turn back. After Luke is aboard the Falcon, they escape. The crew soon rejoin with the Rebel fleet. Luke receives a robotic hand, and Lando and Chewbacca depart on the Falcon to save Han. The end. The beginning of this part, where Luke is going against the wishes of his masters, is really a conundrum you can idealize with. So on one hand, Luke really wants to save his friends. But on the other hand, Luke is not near strong enough to face Vader yet. So while Luke wants to help his friends, Yoda and Kenobi know it will only lead to his death or him turning to the dark side. It's a double-edged sword situation, and that makes you really feel for Luke. The fight scene is really well done too. You get the sense that Vader isn't even really trying, but you're left wondering why would he waste his time with such a weak warrior. We of course soon discover why he's not just wrecking his day, but it's actually pretty cool how the fight goes down, because it almost seems like Vader underestimates Luke a couple times. Like every time Vader thinks he has Luke's abilities figured out, Luke does something that surprises him. So while the fight is one-sided and Vader has control of the entire thing, Luke is able to make little subtle wins here and there, and I really like that. And of course, how could I talk about The Empire Strikes Back without talking about one of, if not the most climactic twists in all of cinema, when we discover that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. This scene altogether is just done so well. I'd say more, but there's really nothing else for me to say. It's just near perfection in terms of story. It's subverting expectations done right. Rian Johnson, you could have learned a few things from this scene, dude. Now, of course, I'm just joking. We're getting to your movie soon, though. Luke and Leia being able to communicate through the Force is pretty surprising, too. For by this point, we have no idea they are actually siblings. It was a really cool way of hinting towards them being siblings or being related somehow without actually saying it, and I thought that was really cool. Overall, part 4 of this film has some of the best stuff out of the entire Star Wars universe, and I think it's a solid finale to this film. Now we move on to the conclusion of this movie as a whole. I am not surprised this is considered as the best Star Wars movie to a lot of Star Wars fans. While I still think Revenge of the Sith is the better Star Wars movie, this one is definitely my number 2. Like I mentioned in my episode 4 review, each one of these original trilogy movies have different tones. While A New Hope is more mystical and Return of the Jedi is more uplifting and hopeful, this film is more somber and bleak. Right off the bat, we are placed on a cold, lonely planet lacking of life. It gives us this feeling of dread, especially when we watch these good guys get decimated in the beginning. And I think that tone of dread just kind of pulls you through the entire film. You know the heroes are mostly going to get out unscathed, but they are still going to be scarred from this, and I think this movie does a great job of doing that. And like I mentioned earlier, while the B-plot in this film is okay, I really enjoyed the A-plot, so I can't complain much about that. So all in all, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, is a great movie. And honestly, like I said, I'm not surprised it's considered to be one of the best movies of all time by many people. Star Wars The Return of the Jedi came out on May 25th, 1983. It was overall beloved by the majority of fans who felt it was a great conclusion to the trilogy. Now, just like I did for episodes 4 and 5, these are going to be the specialized editions I'm going to be reviewing. Maybe one day I'll have to go back and check out the originals, but for right now, that's a video for another day. So today we're asking the question, is Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi good? Is it bad? Is it just okay? Let's check it out. Part 1, Jabba's Palace. This film begins 1 year after Episode 5. Luke concocts a plan to save Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt, using his allies in the plan. Leia unfreezes Han, but they are discovered by Jabba. Luke soon arrives to bargain for his friend's release, but Jabba drops him through a trapdoor with the intent of letting him be eaten by a Rancor. Luckily, Luke kills the creature, however, Jabba sentences him, Han, and Chewbacca to death by Sarlacc pit. Having hidden his lightsaber inside R2-D2, Luke frees himself and battles Jabba's guards, while Leia uses the chains to strangle Jabba to death. And all our heroes escape just as Jabba's barge explodes. So the beginning of this film begins with us seeing that a new Death Star is being built and that the Emperor is coming. If you were watching these films by release order, seeing the Emperor would be a massive deal, for we only got a little bit of a glimpse of him in Episode 5. Now down on Tatooine, I know people have picked apart Luke's plan plenty of times before in the past. However, since it makes for an entertaining experience, I'm not really going to pick at it. For as long as I'm being entertained, I personally don't mind overlooking a few things here and there. In fact, my biggest complaint about this entire part is just, what is up with these droids? Do they feel pain? Do they actually have nerves programmed? I just don't, I don't know. What's going on? I know I made this argument back in my episode 4 review, but I'm not quite sure how that works. Why are droids programmed with nerves? Or how does that even work? I like the Rancor fight, but I definitely feel for its owner. That dude just watched his baby get stomped by a gate. If you ask me, the Rancor handler, he should have been the bad guy of this new trilogy. Not Snoke, not Kylo. That dude could have been vicious. And that's why in Episode 7, Luke was hiding for so long, because he was tired of getting randomly attacked by Rancors. You're just hanging out in your little hovel, and all of a sudden, there's a Rancor just like outside your door, like breaking through your house. If you ask me, that's scarier than anything Snoke would do. Oh my gosh. I think it just made a better sequel trilogy than Disney. Overall, this part is really good. While I think Boba was wasted, I like the intro to the film as a whole, and the blind Han shenanigans are just fantastic. Part 2, Yoda's death. As the other heroes go to join the Rebel Alliance, Luke returns to Dagobah where he finds that Yoda is dying. Yoda confirms that Darth Vader, once known as Anakin Skywalker, is in fact Luke's father, and shortly after, Yoda becomes one with the Force. Soon, the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi reveals that Leia is Luke's twin sister and tells Luke that he must face Vader again to finish his training and defeat the Empire. So this entire part serves mostly to explain the ending of Empire, as well as giving Kenobi and Yoda a reason for not looking like that big of liars. Before I look at this scene and I think to myself, how can you be such a liar, Kenobi? Like, you are a liar. But after rewatching this scene again, I now kind of understand where he's coming from. He lied to Luke about his father to keep Luke safe. For while Luke could kill the man who killed his father, Kenobi didn't know if Luke would actually be able to kill his own father. So I understand why Kenobi and Yoda kept the truth concealed from Luke, for Luke now knowing the truth somewhat throws a wrench in their plans. So while not much actually happens in this part of the film, it's mostly just an exposition dump, I think that it's exposition that was actually needed, so I'm okay with that, and I actually really do like to see, Yoda and Obi-Wan and Luke just kind of talking, so I'm okay with it. Part 3, the second Death Star. The Rebel Alliance learned that the Empire has been constructing a new Death Star under the supervision of the Emperor himself. They discover the Death Star is protected by an energy shield. Han leads a strike team to destroy the shield generator on the forest moon of Endor, and in doing so would allow a squadron of starfighters to destroy the Death Star. And Luke and Leia accompany Han and the strike team to Endor in a stolen Imperial shuttle. Upon arrival at Endor's atmosphere, Luke and Vader detect each other, however Vader allows them passage so he can turn Luke. So after landing on Endor, the squad run into some Imperial stormtroopers but manage to defeat them. However, they are soon captured by little bear creatures known as Ewoks. So one of my biggest complaints about episode 5 and 6 is that no one really seems to care about Luke in this universe. It appears as though all these rebels just kind of look at Luke Skywalker as just like another guy. Not the guy who destroyed the first Death Star, or not the guy who's the only Jedi on your team. He's just another guy. Now I know the novels and other forms of media around this time period show people acknowledging his prowess, but I find it lacking in these films. And this could be easily remedied by just adding 1 or 2 reaction shots of other rebels just kind of looking at Luke for a second, just pausing what they're doing and just kind of watching him in awe, and just being like, oh, that's the guy who destroyed the first Death Star. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I do think that Luke is a big deal, so I'd like to see him actually being treated as a big deal. I always like the fact that Vader knew that Luke was on that stolen ship. It really makes the villains seem extra unbeatable, which of course raises the stakes for our heroes. The speeder bike scene is looking kinda dated, however, I do like that it kinda calls back to the pod race in episode 1. How the action is constantly moving left to right, I really like that. So part 3 of this film doesn't really have much going on, but what does go on is really cool, so I think it's pretty solid.
Been spending most of our lives living in an Ewok paradise. Oh.
After an initial conflict with the Ewoks, our heroes eventually gain the trust of the Ewoks. Later, Luke tells Leia that she is his sister and Vader is their father and that he must go confront him. Leia of course doesn't want him to go, but she does understand why he has to. Soon after, Luke is brought before Vader and he tries to convince his father to return from the dark side to the light. However, Vader declines and takes Luke to see the Emperor. So part 4 of this film has so many good and so many just meh moments. What I mean by this is while there is this awesome plot being concocted by Vader and the Emperor to lure Luke to the dark side, at the same time there's a bunch of Ewok shenanigans happening. Now don't get me wrong, I love Ewoks. They just kind of feel like filler though. Like how I mentioned in my Empire review with the giant worm scenes. The Ewok scenes feel like they were placed into the movie just to kind of make it longer. So what we really want to see is Luke and Vader's A-plot. We get stuck with Ewok B-plot. And I just don't really like it. Then again, this could just be my opinion, but that's just how I feel. I also know something that a lot of fans hate is when Leia says that she remembers her birth mother, even though in episode 3 she had just been born. However, in my opinion, this never bothered me, for the Force works in mysterious ways. Plus, think about it, Anakin had premonitions of the future, so why couldn't Leia have visions of the past? Okay, now on an extremely personal note, this is just how I feel. I could be wrong, but I have to say this. The scene where Luke is talking to Leia about teaching her how to use the Force just really makes me irritated for the sequel trilogy. I mean, I'll get to those films soon, but just listening to just this little 1 minute scene, it really kind of shows you where this franchise could have gone with the sequel trilogy. But then Disney took over, and we have what we have.
My sister has it. It's you, Leia.
I know. Somehow, I've always known.
Somehow you always knew, Leia? Then why you do this? The end of this part where Luke and Vader are discussing Anakin just has so many different dynamics to it. On one hand, we know Vader is attempting to turn Luke, but on the other, we see that Luke is attempting to turn Vader. And the crazy thing is, it appears as though Luke is actually kind of winning. And I think it's a subtle thing, but it really just shows how far Luke has become, not just as a Jedi, but as a human being. Because to this point, we've seen from Yoda and Obi-Wan, they have taught him how to kill Vader, not how to turn him. So it's really cool how Luke took the training he was given, and he kind of did something different with it. So that's really cool. Part 5, the final battle. The Emperor reveals that the Death Star is operational and that the Rebel fleet will fall into a trap. On Endor, Han's team is captured by Imperial forces, but a counterattack by the Ewoks allow the rebels to infiltrate the shield generator. Meanwhile, Lando Calrissian leads the Rebel fleet in the Millennium Falcon, only to find out that the Death Star's shields are still active, and the Imperial fleet is waiting for them. The Emperor orders the firing of the massive super laser, destroying one of the rebel starships. The Emperor then tempts Luke to give in to his anger, and Luke engages Vader in a lightsaber duel. Vader senses that Luke has a sister and threatens to turn her to the dark side. This, of course, enrages Luke, and Luke attacks and severs Vader's right hand. The Emperor tries to convince Luke to kill Vader and take his place, but Luke refuses, declaring himself a Jedi. So the Emperor, furious by Luke's decision, tortures Luke with his Force lightning. After a few moments, Vader, unwilling to let his son die, throws the Emperor to his death but is mortally electrocuted in the process. At his father's last request, Luke removes Vader's mask, and the redeemed Anakin Skywalker dies in his son's arms. After Han's strike team destroys the shield generator, Lando leads a group of rebel fighters into the Death Star core. Lando Calrissian and Wedge Antilles destroy its main reactor. As the Falcon flies out of the Death Star and Luke escapes on a shuttle with his father's body, the station explodes. And back on Endor, Leia reveals to Han that Luke is her brother, and they kiss. Luke cremates Anakin's body on a pyre of fire, and the rebels celebrate the defeat of the Empire while Luke sees Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin watching over him. The end. So I'll begin by saying that I am ultimately okay with the fact that the Empire gets beat by Ewoks. I mean, sure, it's a little far-fetched, but there are thousands of these little guys running around. So while one person with a blaster may be able to easily dispatch a few of these little guys, if a dozen or so jump someone, they wouldn't stand a chance. And I know this movie doesn't actually show how many Ewoks there are, but you can assume there's gotta be thousands of them there. So while the Imperials have more firepower, they are severely outnumbered. So knowing these facts, I'm actually okay with them being beat by the Ewoks. In the throne room, when Palpatine is trying to coax Luke to the dark side, you can actually hear faint music that is reminiscent of the music that plays in Episode 3. Now, I'm not going to play the music because of copyright, but it's definitely something I recommend you listen for next time you watch. It's one of those symbolic things that the original 6 Star Wars movies did really well. As far as the rest of the throne room scenes go, I really think it was done well. Vader and Luke's conclusion is done in a way that you can really feel the tension in the scene. And I think it's nice to see Anakin after all this time. But back on Endor, I kind of have to just say this. The interaction between Han and Leia just makes me laugh. Just because you can see exactly what Han is thinking without him actually saying anything.
It's not like that at all. He's my brother.
I still wish that scene was covered up. I know people were a little annoyed when Hayden Christensen replaced the original actor at the end of the film, but I'm actually okay with this change. I know people say that Anakin should have been the age he was when he died, because that's what happened to Yoda and Obi-Wan. But for me, I don't think it really matters. I think it's one of those things like, yes, from a lore and story element, yes, he should be older. But if we're looking at it from a viewer standpoint, it makes more sense that he looks the way he did back in Episode 3. But overall, while Part 5 of this film isn't perfect, I think it's a very solid finale to this movie. So now we come to my conclusion of this film. While this film does actually have a few issues here and there, overall, I think it holds up really well with the rest of the original trilogy. Even if I would consider it the weakest film in the trilogy, it's still a great addition to the saga, and as a whole, it's a solid film to the original 6 films. And that's why Star Wars Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi, is a great film. But how do you feel about this film? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications for more videos. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. Peace.